From the Joy News Center. This is News at 8.
This is the Primetime News Bulletin here on Joy News on Multi TV. The bulletin is available around the world, on the internet, and across Europe on ABN television. In this edition, government approves insurance package for frontline staff to be engaged in possible outbreak of Ebola in Ghana. Government urges striking public sector workers to call off their action whilst negotiations continue on their Tier 2 pension concerns. Former GIMPA rector says corruption in Ghana is a lot worse than has been captured by global anti-corruption watchdogs. National Food Buffer Stock Company highlights challenges with funding. It says is likely to undermine its operations unless government injects fresh capital. And government, following the recent cholera outbreak, is being urged to focus more on preventing diseases from breaking out. There's also business, sports, showbiz, and international news coming up in the next 60 minutes. Stay tuned.
News at 8 with Israel Lai.
The government, following the recent cholera outbreak, is being urged to refocus its approach in dealing with the issue of filth in the country. According to the executive director of the Coalition of NGOs in Water and Sanitation, CONIWAS, the only way the country can effectively combat the disease is for government to place premium on prevention. Benjamin Arthur spoke with Joy News on the sidelines of a 3-day civil society review of Ghana's natural resources and environment sector.
According to Benjamin Arthur, government's decision to channel huge resources to responding to and managing health conditions that arise due to filth is a step in the wrong direction. He said the country should rather begin investing in activities that will help it achieve its set targets in the area of sanitation and health.
We are not even doing 1% of our GDP for sanitation. If we have such a mechanism, a situation where our inability to fulfill our sanitation mandate is costing around $240 million. Then you don't put in a preventive mechanism to reduce that, then we're going to have a challenge. We have looked at the other end, the curative side, because when it breaks out, it turns into diseases, and we want to put more money into the health sector to cure, instead of putting money into the preventive side, which is making sure people have access to sanitation, enforcing the laws, people cleaning the environment.
The 3-day review of the country's natural resources and environmental sector, being organized by CASA Ghana, is aimed at providing government with the needed information that will enable it to make informed choices and the necessary policy changes on environmental issues in the country.
Former rector at GIMPA, Professor Stephen Ade, says corruption in Ghana is a lot worse than has been captured by the world's corruption watchdogs, adding that commissions of inquiry have become a ploy used by Ghanaian governments to shield their corrupt officials instead of using them to sanction their misdeeds. To fight corruption effectively, there must be the strict enforcement of the declaration of assets by public office holders, as it will also help curb abuse of office. Professor Ade was speaking at the 5th edition of the Annual Audit Service Lecture in Accra.
I believe that without in any way speaking evil of the country of my birth and love, that Ghana today is among the most corrupt nations on earth. And it's a very serious indictment. All the studies, both local, whether it's Integrity, Transparency International, other things, shows that the system is very weak. Use of commissions to deal with malfeasance is directly to cover executive, to allow executive to cover, because when you do a commission, the executive have to decide whether they will follow it. If you had given them directly to be prosecuted in court, when they are found, they go to jail. That's the difference. And therefore, you can have Ghana at 50 commission and all the commissions and other things, and they can make, even presidential directives are not law.
The former GIMPA rector says society's exaltation of wealth, regardless of how it is acquired, has not helped efforts to curb corruption, and that rather than discourage the canker, commissions have promoted higher corruption.
And even more disturbing is the level of corruption, power, fraud, and abuse becoming part of our culture. You know, it's easier to deal with malfeasance, but when it becomes cultural, what do I mean by culture? Somebody steals money, big money, put in prison. When he's coming out, people from his village will come and meet with dancing. That's a cultural support of corruption. Somebody is arrested for dealing in drugs overseas, serves 10 years of prison. When he's coming, all his chiefs want to meet him. Everybody, I've held a public office. I've been an UN ambassador, I've been rector of GIMPA Latin. I should be able to explain what the car I ride in, the house I live in, how I acquired it. And you can say, no, don't, it's my private life. You cannot be a public official and say that the source of your wealth is private.
Former Sharad boss, Justice Francis Emil Short, in his statement said the unavailability of funds to the audit service and other logistical constraints are also fueling corruption.
In some cases, errant officials may have absconded before the reports are submitted, resulting in loss of much needed public revenue. Government and Parliament must do all in its power to facilitate the Auditor General to submit his reports within the stated period and thereby help to stem the rising tide of corruption, waste and mismanagement of our scarce resources.
The Auditor General agreed his outfit could do a much better job and more promptly if government will release their budgetary allocations in good time.
Chief of Staff Prosper Bani says government has approved an insurance policy for frontline workers who will be involved in managing a possible outbreak of Ebola in Ghana. The insurance package is one of the key requests by health workers due to the high fatality rates amongst their colleagues in the countries worst hit by the outbreak. The U.S. ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, currently in Ghana as part of a West African tour, however, says countries must guard against complacency when dealing with Ebola. The two were speaking at a meeting of anti-Ebola response agencies at the Flagstaff House to discuss progress made so far and what more has to be done.
The meeting at Flagstaff House was for the two sides to engage on issues of common interest, but to focus on the Ebola pandemic. The U.S. team was led by Ambassador Samantha Power, who is currently on a fact-finding mission in West Africa, whilst the Ghanaian side, led by Chief of Staff Prosper Bani, included Health Ministry officials and other personnel leading Ghana's Ebola preparedness. Prosper Bani said the insurance policy and capacity building for frontline workers are among key steps being taken in readiness of a possible Ebola outbreak.
We will continue to deepen our work internally as we provide frontline workers for this potential virus with the confidence to be able to work as such. The government has approved an insurance policy for the frontline workers who will be deployed should there be a case. Just last week, the government approved the establishment of the Incident Operations Center here in Accra, and currently we are building the capacity of the center to ensure that it becomes operationally effective. The WHO has kindly agreed to provide us with support for logistics to populate the center to become more effective. We expect that other development partners will come along to ensure that should there be a case, our response will be as effective and robust as possible.
Samantha Power, however, noted extra vigilance is key, considering what the U.S. has had to go through as far as spread of the disease is concerned.
I would draw on our experience to say that, of course, structures alone, to state the obvious, are not enough. Sometimes structures can give one a false sense of security and confidence, and so one has to be very capable not to confuse bureaucracy for readiness. But I understand that you're already, again, exhibiting this kind of vigilance, because I gather there's going to be a tabletop exercise to see, in the event of an emergency, in the event of a case, how the system would work. In the United States, of course, our lesson was drawn from our experience in Dallas, where 2 health workers did not take the proper precautions and had not had, in retrospect, the adequate intense training and modeling and mentoring that one might need in these circumstances. And so with Dallas now, we have intensified our protocols and intensified our training, but hopefully no other country has to have an example like that.
She said President Barack Obama considers Ghana's accommodation of the UN Ebola Center and President Mahama's visit to the Ebola-hit countries major steps in checking stigmatization.
It's an extremely important show of solidarity. I think when the leaders and the people of those countries felt as if the world was turning away, that kind of step is something they will never forget. People will talk about it years from now. That is how central Ebola is also to the psyche of the society, and thus the kind of impression one can make by even just visiting the country at a time of such fear and, again, such unfortunate stigmatization.
So far, 112 suspected Ebola cases in Ghana have all proved negative. Chief of Staff Prosper Bani is calling on bilateral and multilateral agencies to also find means of addressing socio-economic challenges posed by the deadly virus. Gifty Andopia, Joy News, Flagstaff House.
To development, United States Ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, said misinformation, misunderstanding and fear are the most restraining elements besides the lack of logistics in the fight against Ebola. Ambassador Power was addressing a news conference at the UN Mission for Ebola Emergency Response Center here in Accra, following her tour of the worst-hit Ebola countries. Gifty and up here again.
Tons of logistics meant for the countries worst affected by Ebola are stacked up here at the UNMIR warehouse in Accra, waiting to be dispatched. The United States Ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, toured the facility as part of her fact-finding mission.
And warehouses like this don't just exist here at UNMIR headquarters, they exist all around the world. We have the capabilities in all of our countries to end the curve. And the question is, how do we take supplies that exist in warehouses like this around the world and get them where they're needed, where people are desperate for our help, and when doing so, we'll protect not only the people in the affected countries, but also people in our own countries.
She reiterated the need for an accelerated response to the epidemic to prevent further spread of the disease, whilst calling for more assistance and for those who have pledged to make good their promises.
There is a need for far more commitments and far more deliveries upon commitments in order to bend the curve. There's a need for more beds. There's a need for more bleach, more cash in order to pay community mobilizers or people who pick up bodies so as to do safe burial. Our goal is not simply to bend the curve, it is to end the curve. And this is something, because of the commitments that have been made, because of the mobilization that is being done, that we are confident will result, because it must result, in the outstanding gaps being filled. We can see the day when those gaps are filled and when the curve is not simply bent, but is ended. The main message again for the world is fill the gaps so we can bend and end the curve.
The UNMEER has resolved to hit the WHO target of 70% treatment and safe burials by December 2014. The mission's chief, Anthony Banbury, said although progress has been made, much more assistance is needed to keep the virus in check.
We're seeing a lot of progress, work by national governments, NGOs, UN agencies, bilateral partners like the United States, and UNMEER as well. And we're starting to see the impact of all these efforts. There's been a very significant mobilization of international personnel, resources, capabilities to work side by side with the governments, and those efforts are starting to pay off. What we need are three basic things to get this crisis under control, to add to the effort. We need people, especially trained medical personnel, people who can operate clinics, Ebola treatment clinics, community care centers. We need material, and we need money.
Both representatives are calling for quicker responses from other countries. Gifty Andopia, Joy News, UNMEER Center, Accra.
There's more news after. Domestic airliner Starbo's fleet has been grounded until further notice. It followed an incident Tuesday in which a Starbo flight to Takoradi was terminated 20 minutes into the journey and force landed at the Kotoka International Airport. 2 passengers on board sustained some injuries during the evacuation of the aircraft. In the wake of the incident, the second involving the airline this year, Deputy Transport Minister Joyce Barima Osei Asare said the ministry summoned the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority over the matter. The GCAA at that meeting is said to have indicated the Starbo plane involved in Tuesday's incident needed further maintenance before flying. Consequently, the authority has decided to ground the entire fleet for further safety checks, after which an airworthiness certificate will be issued. Well, the Transport Ministry says it will not stop at anything in keeping the country's airspace safe. Already has given its approval to moves by domestic airliner Starbo to ground most of its flights while it carries out emergency service proceedings on them. 2 passengers on board the Takoradi-bound Starbo flight sustained serious injuries as the aircraft developed a fault and forced to do an emergency landing immediately after takeoff. Deputy Transport Minister Joyce Muktari Bawa, earlier on today's Big Story, says it will work together with the Civil Aviation Authority in tightening monitoring systems as far as the various domestic airlines are concerned.
Every now and then, aircraft develop hydraulic faults. Sometimes we might envisage them, sometimes we might mitigate the risk, other times it's almost impossible to foresee that this will happen. What I want us to concentrate on is the effort that will be taken as a ministry and as government to ensure the passengers who use these aircraft are assured of their safety. And I think presently this is a safety issue, and we are working assiduously to ensure that we do not dim the identity of Ghana as a safe and efficient place for running aircraft and airline business.
No, Madam.
That Ghana is a respectable member of the International Civil Aviation Authority. Remember that all these bodies are actually harmonized international standards that all of the countries which participate in airline businesses must adhere to. It is a convention that is binding on all member states, and Ghana is no exception. As I speak to you now, a former head of the Ghana Civil Aviation Authority is actually chairperson of the International Civil Aviation Organization. So yes, as part of this world body, Ghana maintains and continues to maintain very high safety standards.
The National Food Buffer Stock Company says it will not be able to stock up any more than it already does each year unless government is gracious enough to inject more funds into its operations. According to Director of Operations Ken Akwe, NAFCO remains constrained by the constant dissipation of its startup capital of 15 million Ghana cedis.
Though Ghana each year is able to produce between 100,000 and 200,000 metric tons more maize than it can consume, the buffer stock company says it can only stock up 20,000 metric tons due to limited storage capacity. The Director of Operations, Ken Akwe, explains the actual storage capacity is 34,000 metric tons. However, half of it, he says, is unusable.
Since its inception, we have been having to revolve the same $7.5 million. Then you know where we are coming from. The school feeding program feeds one child a day on 50 pesos. I mean, how much can NAFCO, who is the major supplier of the school feeding, sell a bag of rice? So we really undercut the prices. So no investor finds NAFCO attractive as a private partner. Unless government comes in with some major capital injection, it would be very difficult to increase our warehousing capacity.
The occasion was the third meeting of the National Reference Group. A representative of peasant farmers said production suffered this year due to a removal of fertilizer subsidies by government.
Many of them have cut back on their production. Those who were doing maybe 2 acres will do 1 acre or 1.5 acres. Actually, I was even talking to a farmer colleague yesterday. He told me that he's a maize farmer. He didn't do maize. He didn't do maize at all, because he couldn't buy the market price. During the planting season, it was about 120, depending also on where you are buying it.
One other issue that came up was the maize varieties available. Though there are quite a number of high-yielding varieties, the representatives of the farmers said they preferred the Obatampa maize variety. This, the Agriculture Ministry says, has to do with taste of the various varieties.
Obatampa has been with us for a while, and it's very good. It's not different from the normal maize. So when you mill it, it's just like the traditional maize. That is why they like it. And previously, researchers were not taking into consideration the social aspects, whether what they are producing will fit into the eating habit of the people. There have been new varieties, but what about sometimes there's the need for people to know about it. So whenever they release these varieties, the extension officers, we need more extension officers to be able to send this message across, because farmers might not even be aware of these new varieties.
Findings of the research presented at the National Reference Group meeting indicate liberalization of the seed market has allowed increased access to seeds. However, untimely arrival of fertilizers is making operations difficult for farmers. The group intends to advocate for key challenges of the findings to be addressed by relevant stakeholders.
The non-governmental organization Marschallin Relief and Development Services, MAREDES, will from November 5 begin the selection of schoolgirls from deprived communities to benefit from educational support. The initiative forms part of efforts to support girl-child education, particularly in the area of mathematics.
According to the Marschallin Relief and Development Services, a non-governmental organization within the Catholic Church, the program aims at whipping up interest in mathematics among girls. The project, which started in 2013, has already supported 2,000 girls from deprived schools across the 10 regions in Ghana. This year's program looked at reaching out to 5,000 girls. The chairman of the MAREDES board outlined the selection process.
We're using the same principle as we used last year. We got our branches in the various parts of Ghana, especially those in the rural areas, to speak to the education authorities in the districts because they know these areas better. So the selection is through with the district education officers.
As a first step, the NGO is presenting sets of mathematical instruments to girls to encourage them both psychologically and physically to pursue mathematics education.
People have realized where they were that simple things like mathematics set are difficult to come by in some of these deprived areas. And so when we decided to do something about it, we considered girls. And it's really just to consider girls and support girls' education. That's why we did that, yes.
At the official launch of the program, an amount of 20,000 Ghana cedis was presented by Ecobank Ghana support towards the initiative.
We're taking a break. Business News is next.
Good evening. It's time for business. My name is Matilda Nyakwa Kweku. Now, about 700 maize, rice and soya beans value chain farmers and actors from Northern Region, the Upper East and Upper West have met at today's forum hosted by the Ghana Grains Council in Tamale. The forum in the Northern Region capital is to enable them interact with each other and establish market linkages to enhance overall efficiency in their various industries.
The Tamale Forum formed part of the 4th annual Northern Ghana Pre-Harvest Agribusiness Forum, which brought together farmers, buyers, processors, transporters, import dealers and financial institutions. The event, funded by the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, is to enable the actors to learn and share ideas on the season's production outlook, identify critical actions to build competitive businesses, and establish firm marketing relationships for the forthcoming cereal harvest. This year's event was under the theme, Connect and Collaborate to Succeed. Deputy Minister of Food and Agriculture in charge of crops, Dr. Ahmed Yakubu Al-Hassan, commended the organizers of the forum, saying it held enormous benefits for rural farmers as they linked the market dealers to find ready markets for their produce.
Not only to produce exports, which is good, but also to produce to arrest the import of foreign agricultural produce to our country. I think if we wake up and learn and integration, we're able to do this forum that is there.
USAID Mission Director Jim Beaver said the forum played a critical role in transforming the country's agricultural sector, lifting people out of poverty and reducing undernutrition across the north.
Finally, I'd like to commend the Ministry of Agriculture and also the SADA Accelerated Development Authority, SADA, for their efforts and for their leadership and also the coordination of all of us. A very important service. I look forward to meeting SADA later this morning.
Managing Director of GGC, Dr. Godwin Ansah, said the forum had emerged as one of the finest events in the country's agricultural sector, adding the cohesion brought about by the event will make a significant impact in driving the attractiveness and resilience of the grain value chain in Ghana. Some of the actors also shared with Joy News the impact of the project in transforming the livelihood of farmers.
We link all the value chain actors on one platform to share information and communicate. We also provide extension service information to farmers to show them what to do at any point in time. We also provide ready market for the farmers, unlike other platforms that the farmer has to finish producing before he is linked to a market. We will link you to a market before you produce so that you can be able to plan and forecast for the product you are producing.
In a related development, DuPont, an international organization that deals with issues related to agricultural development, and the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, has launched a collaborative program that will boost maize production among smallholder farmers and help to increase their incomes. The initiative, which involves an investment of more than $4 million over the next 4 years, started in July 2014. Known as the Ghana Advanced Maize Seed Adoption Program, GAMSAP, the program is modeled on a similar one undertaken in Ethiopia by ACDI VOCA, the implementing organization in Ghana.
Now, the Producer Price Index for September 2014 dropped marginally to 46.7%. The figure is lower than August 48.3%. The Director of Survey and Census Organization at the Ghana Statistical Services, Anthony Amuzu, however, says the new rate will not be a determinant for companies to increase or decrease prices of their goods and services in the run-up to the Christmas season.
Well, the PPI for September 2014 recorded 46.7%, and this was slightly lower than the figure for August 2014, which was 48.3%. All that this implies is that if you compare prices, that's ex-factory prices, in 2013, September 2013 to September 2014, the September 2014 figure was 46.7%, that of the September 2013 figure. You would expect that if the producer price is going down, some items in the non-food basket would have their prices coming down. But you also have the food basket, which drives the consumer price index down. So the non-food might go up, but the food component, as you know, the harvest season is still there, and so the food component will still drive it down.
Now we look at some international business. Fiat Chrysler Automobiles plans to spin off Ferrari and sell a 10% stake in the luxury car maker on the stock market. The remaining Ferrari shares will be distributed among FCA shareholders. The car maker wants to complete the spin-off next year, with Ferrari shares listed in the US and possibly having a European listing too. The sale is part of a bigger plan by FCA to raise 48 billion euros to fund an investment plan. Mr. Di Monticello's departure from Ferrari followed a public spat over strategy with Mr. Marschallin. He has since taken over as chairman of the luxury car maker. Mr. Marschallin had been a vocal critic on the on-track performance of Ferrari's Formula One team, particularly its lack of world titles since 2007. He has pledged to get the team back to winning ways. Earlier this month, he described the merger between Fiat and Chrysler as the end of a long historical cycle. The U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to announce the end of its quantitative easing program later. The Fed's main policy-making committee is meeting in Washington, where it is discussing whether to stop buying financial assets with newly created money. It has been gradually cutting back the scheme, which began in 2008 since late last year. The markets are expecting that the asset purchases will finally cease. If they are right, it will mark the end of an extraordinary experiment in economic policy. It started in November 2008 amidst the financial crisis and fears the U.S. and the rest of the world might be facing another Great Depression. Well, sports news is next. That's all we have for business.
Well, we begin sports tonight with athletics, and the search for new executives to lead the Ghana Athletics Association might take longer than the expected November 15 date. This follows the suit filed by ex-president of the GAA, George Lutroit, against an incumbent executive member, Andrew Owusu, for defamatory remarks. George Lutroit has warned he'll go the full length in ensuring his image is not dented with allegations of visa racketeering. The much-anticipated National Congress of the Ghana Athletics Association faces a possible delay over a legal tussle. Former chairman, who is standing against incumbent Professor Francis Dodu, George Lutroit, has headed for the law court to sue Commonwealth medalist and national triple jump holder Andrew Owusu, who doubles as an executive member of the Ghana Athletics Association, for defamatory remarks. Andrew Owusu, who was an athlete under George Lutroit's 4-year tenure, openly questioned the credibility and performance of Lutroit and added he was involved in visa racketeering. In reacting to the allegation, George Lutroit, who was appointed as chairman between 2001 and 2005, said his person has been maliciously maligned and denied any involvement in visa racketeering. The Ghana Athletics Association national elections is scheduled for November 15, 2014, and George Lutroit says he will insist on justice even if it means a delay in the national elections. The ex-president of the GA, George Lutroit, has been explaining why he is the best man, and certainly he has been pointing out some flaws in the reign of current President Professor Francis Dodu.
Not one single coach from this country. More fire. The coaches who stand in the sun, who stand in the rain, who get up in the morning, who train these athletes. None of them were good enough for you to take to Commonwealth Games. Instead, you take Andrew Wusu, you take some professor from USTA.
They are not good.
You are not. Why can't you take your own logo?
They are not good.
Are people here not good?
Andrew, they are not good.
Are people not good?
Say they are not good.
As far as I'm concerned, they have no right being there. If you give
they have no right and also Omunya good. Omunya there.
Andrew, as far as I know, he's not a coach. Is he a coach? I don't know. I know he's a lecturer. But I don't know whether being a lecturer that makes you better than the coach. Like a Muzu or like somebody who is at the stadium every day here in Ghana or a coach in Kobasi Stadium. Are you saying who is better than them?
Magangi up being a person who is prof Fuana, fire prof Fuana.
No, I'm not. I've always said that. I've always said that.
More fire.
Me, unlike other people, I deal with the issues. I don't like to have this personality thing and saying this person is bad, this person is this. So, and like, I don't know whether you heard what happened on the radio program.
More fire.
This thing. I was accused by Andrew Wusu. So I like to concentrate on the issue.
All right, so that's it. Some fire in the evening, certainly. We'll see how it goes. But we'll still stay with athletics because the second edition of the Runathon Marathon has been launched in Accra. The special athletics event will witness an extended range of activities and is aimed at raising awareness about lifestyle diseases. Ghana Runathon Foundation is brainchild of the project. The Runathon Ghana Foundation will stage its second marathon event later this month after the 2014 Runathon was launched in Accra on Wednesday. Runathon is envisioned as a festival of running designed to attract a large mass of runners including men, women, boys and girls from various cohorts. It's created to serve both recreational and health needs of participants. Runathon 2014 will feature an extended range of races beyond the 50-kilometer races in its inaugural edition 2 years ago and will be held under the theme Fit for Life. President of the Ghana Runathon Foundation, Eric Adai, exposited the positives of the 50-kilometer ultra-marathon race.
When we talk about an ultra-marathon, we're looking at the distance that goes beyond the traditional 42.2-kilometer marathon. And in some places, they run it by time. When they say, okay, we are running for 24 hours, we'll see who will run the farthest. Or 48 hours, we'll see who will go the farthest. And in Africa, I've always heard of an ultra-marathon or ultra-marathons taking place in South Africa, where they have the 89.2-kilometer Comrades Marathon. And in Morocco, they run a 50-kilometer race in the desert. They brand it as a journey of self-discovery. See what your body can take. In West Africa, we are the only people doing ultra-marathon, and it's for a reason. In long-distance running, George had said the Kenyans have not featured in the ultra-marathons, but they do it as part of their training. Once a month or every 6 weeks, you need to run long, slow distance. It's a way of turning your energy systems from a petrol engine into a diesel engine, so you can go far.
Runathon is scheduled to take place on November 29 and aims at raising awareness for diabetes, hypertension, hepatitis B and prostate ailments. The various categories include 50-kilometer ultra-marathon for men and women, 50-kilometer wheelchair ultra-marathon race, 50-kilometer 5-man road relay race, and a mass 10-kilometer walk.